Okay, so before we start, right, if you have any queries, questions, basics is clear to everyone, or any questions, queries here on the basics?
No question.
No questions, Pranay?
Yes, sir.
Any questions or all good? You're understanding the things. Are you able to?
Yeah, understanding.
Okay, so I want you to send me all your components by tomorrow EOD, right? At least 9, 10 components I want each one of you to send. Doing the basics, nothing else, right? Accessing HTML data into JavaScript, passing from Java data from JavaScript to Apex, accessing data back from Apex into JavaScript and post it back into HTML. These things you just need to do. Now today we talk about these two files. We haven't talked much around this, right? So CSS. When it comes to CSS, there are two things to remember, right? One is, so when we talk about CSS, so what is the purpose of CSS? Why we use CSS?
To style
For
HTML
styling.
elements.
Yeah, for styling, right? So what are the ways we can use the CSS where you can refer for like CSS classes? Now suppose you are new to LWC or new to Salesforce and you want to give some styling. Basically, whenever we talk about styling, the main concern that we see is giving a proper alignment, spacing, margin, and then coloring and all those things will fall, right? So for understanding what all classes are available, or we should start directly using CSS. Do you know what place we refer for getting the CSS classes which are out of box available in Salesforce?
SLDS.
Correct. So we always go to SLDS. So whenever you want to use styling, right, make yourself aware of what is out of box available, what is the place where I can go and check for the styling, right? Where to go here? Utilities or blueprints? In utilities you will
Utilities.
find, right? In utilities, alignment, borders, if you want to give a box styling, all those things are available here. Sizing, scrollable. If there is huge data, you want to apply the scrollable. But if you don't know how to apply scrollable, just click here, see the samples and try to use that code. Right? Okay, so first thing is understanding from where we can get, right? So one is your SLDS utilities. So learn on this. Again, I'm repeating. Basic things are your margin, borders, your padding, right? So those are the basic things. You must be aware of those. Rest of the things will, as and when the need arise, you can learn. But meanwhile, you can go through this the way you have went through the base components, right? Otherwise, how would someone know like what component I should use? So the way you have went through the component library, you can go through this as well. Just go through this and try to understand what all styling and how it is taking in effect when you apply those classes. So at least you know where are those things and then you can easily access. So this is one thing. What is the other thing? Other thing is giving your own classes. So from SLDS you can get the standard classes. CSS class, I'll say. And then you can have your own CSS. So for that, what we need to do, we need to rely on, let me refresh one more time. Okay, so for that we need to rely on the CSS file. So we have already seen which all components are a part of our LWC package. So these are the four files: HTML, JS, CSS and meta. So CSS file is used for that purpose, for applying the styling. So this is your CSS class, and within your class, what we are doing, we are defining what styling you want to apply. So again, for practicing this, you can always go back to W3 schools, or you can search for any other bloggers, learn basic CSS styling. And it's very simple, right? If I want to give some styling, I can go here, I can look at my component, just right click and say inspect element, right? So when I inspect, it gives me things within the browser itself. So if I want to apply some styling here, I can just click and I can try. Suppose I want to give some margin, right? So px is in pixels. You can nowadays you can give in rem, which is 1 is equal to 10 pixels kind of thing, right? You can verify it. And you can very easily see the impact whenever you are applying. So if you want only margin from left side, you can give margin left. And you can see the effect. See, only margin is getting applied from left side. So if you have a requirement where you want to give some margin from the left hand side, you can use margin left. If you want, now this text, if you see like, okay, this is very congested and I want to apply some padding as well, so you can give padding as well. If you don't put anything left, right, top, bottom, it will apply on all sides, right? See, so I will ask you to practice it here, because this will put you in a better confidence level, that okay, this is styling, this is very simple, right? And if you don't use this, you might feel like, okay, this might be very difficult one, I'm not getting that. And that's how we will try to run away from that, and you will never learn, right? So I'm telling you the multiple techniques which I have personally felt that, okay, that was useful for me to improve my knowledge on CSS, right? And this doesn't take much of your logical expertise, it is just knowing, okay, what all styling you can apply. And if you want to understand, you can go to any other components and try clicking, right clicking, and check, okay, what existing class they are using, what are the properties. Try giving similar properties here from any other websites. If you find something fancy and you want to implement that, you can just check on the CSS and try applying that. Okay, so we have seen two ways how you can work with the styling, right? One is using the SLDS, other one is using your own class where you are inspect, that is we call it as a developer toolbar, right? Developer toolbar inspect element, this is going to help you. If you want, I can put a screenshot as well, so that and someone can relate it here. Any questions so far? Okay, so the next important thing while we are using CSS, so we know from where we can refer, from where we can get the CSS classes to apply to our elements, UI elements. Now, how to apply it? Inline CSS versus CSS file. Okay, which one is better? Which one is allowed? Okay, so whenever you are giving styling, so I have already applied some styling. Let me show you. So if I go to HTML, see there are two div elements. One is using inline style. Inline in meaning what? You can use this style tag or style attribute on any element, DOM element, and there you can define border color, colon, red. Whatever we are defining in the CSS class here, we can define it here as well, right? But consider if there are 10 same components like this. If I have 10 such components, now I realize, okay, instead of crimson I want to give green color. Now what I have to do, I have to change this green at how many places? 10 different places, right? Instead, in same way, if I have this component 10 times and I realize, okay, I want to change the styling, I can simply go in here and change it here, right? It will apply to all those 10 different components or 100 different components. Okay, benefit is a different thing, but as per standard process, it is not a best practice to use inline styling. So avoid using inline styling anywhere in your component, in your HTML file. If you want to give a style, define a class here, put that styling here and just use that class. How we use that class? It is very simple. You just put that class in the class tag. You can use multiple classes as well. You just need to add a space, add another class, then space, another class, and you can use a combination as well. This class you can combine with your standard class as well. So suppose I want to give this class to this element, div class this, I can see here. Here also you can see there is a custom class applied. I can put one more, and you can observe like, okay, what is taking precedence if you are applying multiple classes, what all properties are getting applied. For that you can always go and right click on that element and see, okay, what is getting applied on that styling. Okay, and generally the best practice is, if you want to do some styling, always use this place, give the styles. Whenever you feel okay, this is working proper, copy this entire thing, put it in your CSS file with some class, and then use that class on that component. That way it becomes really simple and quick. Otherwise you will put something here, again go to the page, and you know the issues with LWC, right? It doesn't get refreshed quickly. So for speeding up, you can simply do this. Okay, so these are the small things you need to remember about CSS. Don't take it too lightly that, okay, okay, these are the two three things I can do it easily. Yes, you can do it easily, but there are various different type of styling, right? So unless you explore the things on CSS, you won't be able to know about that, and you will just limit yourself to two three things: margin, padding, background color, border. That's it. There are various other things as well. Better you go and explore on this. Also you can follow some blogger or W3 school to understand, okay, what are the basic styling and what are the new styles coming into market. Okay, so that will keep you up to date. So this is all about your CSS. Any questions, or it is clear? You will be able to apply the CSS now in the right way. Okay, I'll take it as a no. Then the next thing I wanted to cover is to understand what are the decorators. Okay, and which decorator to use when. So we know whenever we are declaring a variable, right? Whenever we are declaring a variable in our JavaScript, we need to give a decorator. It's not mandatory, but it comes with a purpose, right? So most common is your track decorator. Track will make your variable. So this track will make your variable dynamic. So whatever changes you're applying here, it will reflect on your HTML. You don't need to do anything extra. Right? For accessing element, what we need to do? We need to use this code. This dot ref dot this dot value. We need to access and put. But if we are changing it here and directly we want to reflect on the HTML, in that case, we will use a track decorator. But track decorator, we don't need on the primitive data type. We just need it on the object or complex data type like arrays. Otherwise, without track as well, the properties are reactive. So it is called reactive, making it reactive. So what does I mean by reactive? Suppose you are entering something, right? And if you are accessing this thing in JavaScript and assigning it to some variable, and if you are printing that variable here, it will automatically get printed. You don't need to explicitly access that element and put that details. Okay, that's how. Suppose now if you are put entering something here and you want to see it here, what you need to do? Do that. So if you want to assign some value here, we will put a value is equal to some variable. From this input box, we can assign a value. So on change handler we already have. So if I go to on change handler, have we defined it? We haven't defined it. Okay, this is the on change handler. Within this on change handler, if I want to access this one and I want to put the value as equal to whatever value I am entering in the first one. So in this case, I am accessing that element. I am accessing this element and then I am putting the value. Okay, so if I have say variable called text input 1, see these are the two ways. One is accessing the element, one is using reactive property. So if you want to assign something on that second text box from first text box, right, If I don't use this, the only way is to access this component, right? I'm accessing this component and then I'm setting this value attribute from the first input text box. Whatever value I'm entering, I'm assigning it. Second way is I don't need to access this. I just need to define a variable. I need to assign value to the variable, and that variable I need to put it here. Are you following or you are having questions? What I am saying? Akanksha.
Understanding.
Right? This is straightforward. I'm just trying to explain the concept. So that's where the reactive property is very important, because without doing anything, without accessing anything from the HTML, that variable, if you are changing it in the JavaScript, it is reflecting on the UI as well. If you put that variable on UI here, I say using p tag, and I just put it here, it will start printing, right? I don't need to do any efforts, whereas in normal JavaScript you have to access this and put inner HTML is equal to that value. Without that you can't do. See, getting my point, what I'm trying to explain? Are we doing anything? Are we accessing this text box? Are we accessing this p tag? We have just defined that variable, and that variable is reactive. Because of that reactive property, if I assign that variable here, it will automatically start pulling that value. Got it? So that's the beauty of your reactive nature. So wherever you have such requirement, you can use the variables. Now the next thing is track. As I told, right, track is required. Now I haven't given track, but still it become reactive. Track is required for this kind of data where you have arrays, and this keeps on changing, right? So always rely on the standard documentation from Salesforce. Release wise, they keep on changing these things. And the rest thing is your API. So API is, consider it as a kind of public or global thing, right? Whenever you want to access one class variable from another class. So for that, if it is a private, you cannot access. But if it is a public, you can access, right, from another class. You just need the class name and dot, you can access that variable. So that's where for public properties, like if you have multiple components, two components want to send data to one another. We will see that in another session. What is the component communication? But imagine if there are two components and they want to communicate with each other. They want to share data, exchange data. So that's the place there we need API decorator. Without API, those variables will not be accessible. The same way what we have done, if we want to access something from our Apex, right? What we have done, we declare it as a Aura enabled. Why? Because without Aura enabled, it is not accessible in our JavaScript. The same way, without @API, you cannot access. Say from this component, I want to pass this data into the another component in this component. So for that purpose, I need to declare whatever properties I want to pass, whatever properties I want to access, those has to be decorated with @API. Okay, and whatever decorators you are using, you need to import those from LWC. What is the remaining one? What is the other decorator? Track,
Wire.
API, and wire. Correct. So can anyone help me with when we use wire decorator? What is the use case for wire decorator?
To call from Apex.
to call from, so you want to call Apex from JavaScript. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Okay.
Page
Or
load.
correct. Automation, right? Whenever you want to call Apex on a page load without user interaction, that's where we call it wire. So we are setting up the connection with wire. We don't need any user action to call, right? So that is the place where we use wire. I think there was one component, right, where we had that test LWC. Not in certificate maker. Okay. Yeah, this is our wire, right? So there are various ways you can write same method. So wire is this wire, what it will do, it will call this method. Again the same procedure, right? This method to be written in your Apex class, and then you need to get that method. So this is the way to import that method, make it accessible, and on load, page load, it will invoke it. So one way is using this. You are calling that method, storing the result. Another way is you are calling that method, and for result you are using error and data. So this method is used if you want to alter that data. If you want to change some data in the JavaScript, always recommended to use this way. Okay, so there are just different syntax, nothing else. Here as well you can pass parameters as well, right? Same way using your JSON format, key value pair. You can pass parameters. Normally we need to pass record ID, correct? Again, if you see record ID, we are decorating with @API. Can anyone tell me why using @API for record ID? What could be the reason or logic behind this? See, record ID is something outside of your LWC component, and you are accessing that within your LWC component. That's where anything outside of that component, you will need API, @API property. Getting the point? So Salesforce has itself keep that logic. They are also do maintaining that logic. If you want to access record ID, you need to declare @API property. Without this, you won't be able to get. Okay. So that is about the decorator. It's very straightforward, but you need to understand when to use API, when to use your track, and when to use your wire. Once you understand the business use case, it will be very easy for you to use. So API, whenever there is a communication, right, from one component to another, or outside thing to within your component, you will always go with API. Track is making your variable reactive. Few of the variables are by default decorated with the track. You don't need to put a decorator. I mean, primitive data type, right? We have already seen that. And the third thing is wire. Wire we use for if we want to do something, some activity on page load, we want to access some data from your backend using Apex, we will always use this wire one. Can anyone answer, like, if I don't have wire and on user action I want to get data from database using Apex, what is the way to do that?
Imperative call.
Correct. So if you don't use wire, on user click you want to access, that is called imperative Apex call. The method remains same, whatever you are writing in the Apex, that remains same, only the way you are invoking that differs, right? So if I say, if you write with the help of wire, this is your syntax, right? Whatever method you want to access, this is the syntax. If you want to do with imperative, we know what is the syntax. We are using that, right? The method, then your parameters, whatever response you are getting, here you can play around with the response. And if you are getting error, you can display the error on the UI as well. And one important thing, if your any additional steps or your JavaScript logic is depending on this response, always put it inside, because this is something called promise, right? It otherwise in JavaScript it is line by line execution. It won't wait for this to finish. So if you have anything dependent operation, always use it here. Okay. Okay. Now last thing is your XML file. So or meta file. This is your file which the important thing is the version, what version you are using, API version. The next thing is exposed. So if this is true, then only this will be available to use in UI. If this is false, you won't be able to access this. So if I want to put that element here, I just need to go and do this, right? Edit page, and I can access that. But if it is set to false, it won't be available here in this list of components. So if you see on the left hand side, whatever components you create, it will start appearing in the custom components. So my component is appearing because I have set it to true. The exposed is set to true. Now this property target is to define at what place you can access this. So there are various places. Can anyone help me? What all places apart from this? This is one of the place where we can use our component. What other places are there?
Sir, Lightning app, Lightning
Correct.
page,
If you want to create
code
a
page.
lightning app, page we have already seen. What else? You see here, right at the bottom.
Record page.
Yeah, record page we have seen. Lightning page is another thing, correct? You can use on this utility bar as well. If you have communities, you can use in the communities as well. So wherever you want to use, that is defined via these targets where to use. So if you define target, then only it will be available. Otherwise, it won't be, like the home page, tab, utility bar. Even you can use it in the flow. So there are various places where you can use, and you can simply see this. So if you click on create new component, you will be presented with all the targets. Mainly, majorly where we use is record page, app page, home page, as a tab, as an utility bar, within flow screen, right? Using a record quick action, that is where we put our buttons, right? Quick action here. If I want to use the component, my lightning web component. So for that purpose, I need to define this target, record quick action. In community, if I want to use, I need to define this. So this is to understand where we want to use and how we can use it. Okay. So there are few other purposes as well when you want to use this. Now I'll tell you. Target is one thing. If you see here, so if I again go back and say edit page. Now if you see any standard component, so say activities, I'll go here, or I can go to details. You can go to highlighting panels. Everywhere you will see some properties are getting showed here, correct? So these properties are nothing but variables declared in your meta file. So there are ways to declare properties as well. You can go and Google or go in the Lightning Web Component library and check how we can declare that. But that will give you the ability to put or define some variable where admin can configure. Now instead of 3, I can put 5 here, and then it will start showing me 5 buttons, right? And you can do this same with your component as well. But that time, which decorator you will need to use? Will it be a track or API or wire? I am putting some value here and I am accessing in my component.
Track.
Okay. Anyone else?
API.
It will always be API. Why? Because this is outside. From outside, we are accessing this within our component, right? Track is also correct when we are dealing with our own component on the UI. But this is from somewhere else. You are passing this to your component. So that's where generally we use API. Okay. So you can try defining properties to your component as well. But that is too advanced thing. We don't want to go in that level deep, right? Simply if you understand what is a target and what target to use and where all places you can use your LWC, that is also fine. So what you can do, you can create a component and try putting your component in the quick action, in utility, in home page, in your create a tab, right? And in your record page. So all 5 places you can put your component. Getting the point what you need to do? Whatever component you are creating, I want you to access that component in this button from utility, within your record page, on your home page, and as a separate tab. Within that separate tab, that component should appear. Okay. Any questions, queries?